Colleagues, the agenda. Item 1, minutes of the meeting held on 7th of July 2015. May I sign those as a true record? Thank you. Are there any apologies for absence, please, Mr Taylor?
Thank you, Leader. We have received apologies from Councillor King.
Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest?
None received in advance, Leader.
Thank you. Item 4, questions from members of the public. There are none listed, I say. Thank you. In that case, the forward programme for September 2015 is outlined on pages 9 to 12. Any alterations, colleagues, or is everyone happy? The silence I would take is everyone being happy. May we'll approve that? Thank you very much. Item 6 is budget management, 2015-16, pages 13 to 20. Councillor Ramsdale.
Thank you, Leader. Regarding the budget management report, this is the second budget management report for 2015-16, reviewing performance against the budget. The report includes 5 recommendations to the Executive. Regarding the General Fund, it's forecast to be close to budget at the year end, but there are some forecast variances, as can be seen in table on page 4, and these will be reviewed as we prepare the budget for next year. The homelessness part of that budget is under pressure. It's predicted that on current demand levels, there is a potential overspend of £40,000. The rent deposit scheme is proving a cost-effective solution, and recovery deposits is achieving above budget. It's thus recommended that £10,000 of that income can be used with consideration given as to whether the balance of the overspend can be met from other sources at the end of the financial year. So 10k now, the rest later perhaps. And we'll note that the Executive Director approved a supplementary estimate of £36,000 to cover the planning appeal costs awarded to Courtium Sports Limited at the cost assessments hearing on Monday, 27 July. This was considered as an urgent approval to avoid incurring additional interest. Regarding the capital, so the General Fund capital, at this point, rescheduling has been identified of about £1 million into next year for the Gostry Centre project. Overall, the capital projects are on budget. In the Housing Revenue Account General Fund, 2 legal cases are being resolved at an estimated cost of £30,000 in legal fees. It is recommended this can be met from the additional income achieved on investment income. With regard to the Housing Revenue Account's core capital programme of £8.6 million, it's progressing on budget. There is a proposed adjustment to the structural works budget to develop a specific programme to refurbish post-war properties, resulting in a recommendation to carry forward £320,000 into next year. Additional compliance on boiler and heating systems is proposed to be funded from underspends on doors, windows and drainage budgets. And following preliminary sheltered lift repair estimates, an additional funding of £35,000 has been identified to enable this work to be completed. The new homes programme within the Housing Revenue Account capital includes a budget of £4.7 million for proposed schemes. Alternative options for the Way Court site are still under consideration by the Housing Delivery Board, so that results in an expected rescheduling of £3 million into next year. Leader, the 5 recommendations are contained in the report on page 19 and in our agenda on pages 2 and 3.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, are there any comments or questions on that? This is very comprehensive. There are 5 recommendations. Item 6, are they agreed? Treasury management activity year to date. Councillor Ramsdale.
Thank you, Leader. The Treasury Management Activity Report is presented in the usual format with graphs showing total value of investments, performance, liquidity or maturity, and risk or credit rating for that risk. The average rate of interest being earned is 0.76%. That's 0.17% above target, and we anticipate that we will exceed the income budget of £500,000 for this year. Within our approved strategy, we only invest in A or better rated investments. Unusually, one investment of £3 million now has a BBB+ rating. when the investment was taken out, it had an A+ rating, but as per the policy. However, there's been a reclassification or change arising from a general change by the agencies which affects all of their ratings and potentially all financial organisations. What the agencies have done is removed implicit sovereign support from the ratings calculations. So all investments of that nature have effectively been classified down a bit. So, Leader, the recommendation to note the activity is at page 23 in the report and on our agenda at page 3.
Thank you very much. Yes, done very well to exceed what we hoped. Every time it looks as if we're going to get an increase in our interest rates, something happens and it moves back again. So, well done. Any comments, anybody, please? No? Then there is one recommendation on item 7. Is that agreed? Item 8 is the local plan progress report. Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Leader. The plan is proceeding on schedule with some difficulty, mainly from changes to the various rules that we think we're working under, either from the government or due to legal or due to some other agency. But starting with the SHMAR, we have got a figure for the SHMAR, and at the moment, of course, Guildford and Woking also have a figure, and we have to just confirm that where each member of our housing market is happy with those figures, and so that is what's going on. But basically, we have got a SHMAR figure. Recently, there was 2 court cases have indicated to our consultants that more work might be done in respect of calculation for affordable homes. Also, of course, Mr Osborne is expected to apply new rules, the duty to cooperate shortly, and to allow for more building around villages to improve their sustainability. So those are the unknowns in respect of our SHMAR, but at the moment we think we know where we are, and most of that work is completed. As far as the SHLAR is concerned, again, most of that is completed. We do have to take into account some adjustments if flood risk assessments contradict some of the factors that we've taken into account for coding of the SHLAR sites, and that work is going on, and I think we have a few sites, probably roughly 50, which we have to do more detailed assessment on. The employment land review, that is definitely completed. We have a sufficient employment land to accommodate Waverley's requirement, but there is some mismatch between land designations. We need more office space and less light industrial, so we do have to make some changes there. The flood risk assessments, these and the sequential tests are also largely complete from a local plan point of view, but obviously when individual sites come up for planning application, that assessment has to be done again. I think that as far as these sequential tests are concerned, as I mentioned earlier, they do affect our classification in the SHLAR, so those two things are linked in a way. I think there are certain sites where we do actually need to ask our consultants to do a few more checks as far as the flood risk is concerned. SANG, we have got a work package now underway in respect of SANG in conjunction with the Finance Department, and we're hoping we'll be able to make progress on that quite quickly. We have a relatively small amount of SLANG in reserve now in Farnham Park, which of course we are trying to allocate in line with Farnham's neighbourhood plan, but that's not always possible because it depends on the sequence in which applications come in for approval. The transport assessment, That has had a bit of a light period over the last few weeks because of the holidays, but we have largely completed the work on the A281, although there is some challenge to some of that, surprise, surprise, from Vectus, who are representing Dunsfold Park. That is something that is going to distract us significantly from some of the work that we're working on. So we're now moving to do the checks in Farnham and using the standard product that Surrey have for checking the flows around the junctions in Farnham. I think there are about 9 junctions that their model works with. After that, there's a strategic transport assessment that we have to start, which is really with Surrey and the Highways England to integrate all the findings that we have with their whole major highways activities. The 8th work package we're working on is other infrastructure. Much of the core data has been identified. As the spatial strategy emerges, confirmation of capability and timescales of provision will be sought from the providers, and this is likely to be a constraint on housing delivery timing. And finally, we have a traveller accommodation assessment, which there is a small difference between what we currently have and what we think we might have to provide. So that is something work still to be done. So the statement on this supports the item 1 on page 33, which is the September 15 report to be submitted to the executive outlining progress. And the rest of the project is on schedule according to the dates on page 33, which are what I provided to the all-member briefing on July the 15th. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Interestingly enough, if your microphone's still on, do you, Mike? Interestingly enough, I heard on the radio, I think last week on the BBC, that Surrey had announced the busiest road in the county was the A281, and it was formally announced as the A281. And you make reference to Mr Osborne and his announcements. He was going to make those before the recess, which I think is about 7 weeks ago. So I'm not holding my breath. Any other comments, please, members? Councillor Denis.
Yeah, it's just a couple of observations, Leader. In the background papers on point 1.2, where it talks about the high level of support for mixed use at Dunsfold Aerodrome, yes, there was across the borough, but I think the level of support locally, where the impact is probably greater, wasn't quite so supportive. So it's just an observation. And under point 1.5, the strategic flood risk assessment, having looked at the document, there seemed to be a technical issue when Alfold Parish Council were asked for views, that some of those views didn't get included. I believe the clerk has notified the author of that, but again, it's just an observation that with the flooding problems of Alfold, that maybe wasn't covered in the detail that it needed to be. Thank you.
The officers are here and writing furiously, I see, to note that. Thank you very much. Yes, and as you say, yes, perhaps not the support immediately. I think government fails to note that everybody's in favour of a building, they tell us, but not where they live. And that is the bit where it all goes horribly wrong. Any other comments, please? In that case, item 8, there is one recommendation. Is that agreed? Thank you. 9 is the Alfold Conservation Area Appraisal. Councillor Adams, this is one of many, I think.
Thank you, Leader. This is a particularly interesting report, as it appears the southern section of Alfold, which the conservation area covers, especially around St Nicholas Church, is an area of Waverley where time has largely passed it by. The well-preserved historic buildings allow life in the village to be seen as it might have been at least 100 years ago. The Alford CAA is the 12th of the 43 conservation areas in Waverley to be appraised and recommended for consultation. The appraisal map on page 71 includes a number of boundary extensions and 2 small removals due to English heritage guidance and the wish to give some additional protection to buildings and historic walls. The list of them here is the garden extension of Thistledown, gardens at the rear of Loxwood Road, the garden of Allfold House, the Jubilee Pond and Granary. There are 2 very small areas suggested for removal from the conservation area. A small area of woodland to the rear of number 2 Glebelands Meadow and the removal of land at Allfold Business Centre. Each of the changes is explained on pages 59 and 60 of the report. A consultation is proposed for a period of 6 weeks and will target all residents, businesses and other interested parties. Responses will be assessed for any amendments required before the boundary changes are recommended to Council. I would draw your attention to the management plan, page 61, which covers a number of general and 5 specific areas of potential enhancement and makes 3 recommendations about how these may be progressed. The recommendation is to approve the draft conservation area for Allfold for the purposes of public consultation. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is to approve going to consultation. Colleagues, any comments? Councillor Dinas.
Thank you. I had the opportunity of walking around Allfold whilst the alterations were discussed. This is an excellent report with a great historical background. The boundary extensions removals are very appropriate. They were drawn up prior to a number of buildings being built. And at a time where we're looking for opportunities for making money, I think I need to draw Councillor Ramsdale's attention to the opportunity that the old stocks and whipping posts might bring to us.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, 1 recommendation, is that agreed? Agreed. We now have item 10, the play area strategy 2015 to 2024. Councillor Thornton.
Thank you, Leader. This report seeks approval for the adoption of the play area strategy. The play area strategy runs for 10 years, but will be reviewed after 5 years to make sure that it is continually being kept up to date. The strategy is looking at all playgrounds, skate parks and multi-use areas. It's looking to give more structure approach to planning refurbishments and new facilities, and looks to identify external funding, i.e. PIC money and 106 money, etc. There are 3 recommendations to the Executive Leader. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any comments, colleagues? No. Item 10, 3 recommendations. Is that agreed? Agreed. 11 is the HRA Asset Management Strategy 2015 to 2020. Colleagues, the Council is responsible for the upkeep of some 5,000 council homes, and these collectively represent the Council's most valuable asset. The Council is committed to ensuring that these homes are of good quality and are well maintained, and this strategy sets out the Council's priorities over the next 5 years. This includes making Waverley's homes more energy efficient, updating kitchens and bathrooms, and tackling damp problems. I would like to thank the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee for their positive comments and suggestions, which have been incorporated in the final report. Colleagues, you'll be aware of the recent announcement by Government of a 1% year-on-year reduction in housing rents, and this will inevitably impact on the delivery of this strategy, as well as our 30-year HRA business plan, to the tune of £170 million in lost revenue. While the priorities set out in the Council's HRA strategy are still valid, the greatest impact the Government's announcement will be on our ability to build any new homes. Any comments, please, colleagues? one recommendation on item 11. Is that agreed? Item 12 is the Homeless Strategy Update, Year 2. The report, colleagues, updates the Executive on the excellent performance by Housing Service in preventing homeless and the progress that has been made towards achieving the second-year targets set out in the Homeless Strategy Action Plan. The broad headlines are: the number of homeless households placed in temporary accommodation in Waverley remains the lowest in Surrey. The pressure on services continuing to increase, with even more households approaching the Council's Housing Options team for advice to prevent homelessness. Key to Waverley's success in preventing homelessness is a positive approach, using a range of different housing options, including opportunities in the private rented sector. I share the concerns expressed by the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee about government's proposals to further extend the right to buy and require councils to sell off their most valuable council houses when they become vacant. This will clearly make it much harder for council to meet local housing need. I would like to thank our Housing's Option team for their hard work and commitment to preventing homelessness in Waverley, and I ask you to support the recommendations set out in the agenda. Any comments, please? Councillor Ramsdale.
Thank you, Leader. Just an observation, really, that I was in a shop the other day and one of the assistants was talking to me about the fact that they thought I was a councillor and how well the homelessness situation was being managed. She herself was saved from being homeless because of our own council rent deposit bond scheme. So I just thought I'd link into the fact that there are real people out there that are benefiting as well as us seeing the numbers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's always good to hear that we've been successful. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Leader. Again, a terrific report. I just wonder on page 176, Annex 1, looking at the number of households in temporary accommodation in Surrey, and our figures obviously stack up very well against our near neighbours. It's not a question I want an answer to, but I wonder if, sort of directed towards officers, is there anything that we can learn from Spelthorne, who back in 2010 had very low numbers and have rocketed up to 111 people? And I just wonder if there's anything that we can learn from Spelthorne, what happened there that has caused such a large number of people to suddenly go into temporary accommodation. It's not so much what it affects us in Waverley, but I want to make sure that we don't end up in a similar situation. So I don't want an answer, but I'll offer that to you, Damien.
Yes, thank you very much. Of course, this is an ongoing problem with Surrey, isn't it? We have so little in common with Spelthorne. It's probably going to be very, very difficult to be like for like. I do wonder if they do pick up anybody from the airport, actually, because their border is on the fence of Heathrow, so whether they have to take any of those now, that may well be the answer, I don't know. But the kind of London boroughs, the numbers are much higher, as you will see. Epsom and Ewell, Spelthorne, Reigate and Banstead, the numbers are much higher than the further you go south, the less it becomes. So that is Surrey being so unsuitable to all be together, but this happens. Thank you. Councillor Denis.
It's just an observation which might shine some light on that. Obviously, Spelthorne are near Bronzefield Prison, so obviously a lot of people who are released from prison would fall into that category, and obviously Epsom would probably pick up some from the High Down prisons and Downview prison. So that might be where a number of extra people will come into the system, and I do know that they've put additional staff within the prisons to help them find accommodation when they leave the prisons. It just might be an explanation.
Thank you. Item 12, one recommendation. Is that agreed? Agreed. 13 is improving energy efficiency. Councillor Thornton.
Thank you, Leader. This is a mandatory requirement for local authorities to report on greenhouse gases. Over the last 5 years, Waverley's done a lot of work to reduce energy costs and increase energy efficiency. During the report year 2014-15, we have managed to maintain energy expenditure below 2008 levels. This is estimated at the cost avoidance of becoming more efficient when compared to business as usual is in the region of 800,000. Greenhouse gas reduction of 8.5% in 2014-2015. There are a number of factors beyond our control, however, that not allow us to achieve better, such as weather pollution, growth in services, growth and also carbon intensity of fossil fuels. Waverley has now generated 4.5% of its total energy demand from renewables. Some good examples of progress: leisure centres, 17% reduction in energy, even with a 33% increase in footfall. Offices at the Berries, 28% energy reduction, which equates to 17,000 reduction in energy costs. And car parks, energy reduction and 45% cost reduction by looking at energy efficient lighting. Improving energy efficiency will be a contribution to balance the budgets, thus investor-safe projects. Thank you, Leader. There's one recommendation.
Yes, thank you very much. Any comments, please? Thank you. Item 13, one recommendation. Is that agreed? 14 is decision-making protocol for licensing of scrap metal dealers. Thank you. Councillor Denis.
Leader, there are a number of businesses that deal with scrap metal. To reduce theft, fraud and money laundering, these premises require a scrap metal dealer's licence. In addition, there's also a collector's licence. This decision-making protocol reflects best practice and ensures the way Waverley deals with these issues are fair, reasonable and open to scrutiny. This protocol identifies the steps to be taken when decisions may be contentious. The details of the protocol are shown at Annex 1. This protocol has been endorsed by the Licensing and Regulatory Committee but needs to be ratified by the Executive as an executive function. There is one recommendation for this Executive to consider, which is on page 212. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, this is all exciting stuff. Sorry, Kevin. Any comments, please? Thank you. There was one recommendation. Item 14, is that agreed? Agreed. Item 15 is the Independent Remuneration Panel. This is a review of a special responsibility allowance due mainly to a very large change in the number of meetings by the Joint Planning Committee. Councillor Isherwood, do you want to speak, or you're very welcome to.
Thank you very much, Leader. No, my query was resolved by Robin Taylor earlier on today. Had I read the members' handbook properly and read the small print that said only one allowance would be paid to any holder, that was something I think that should be emphasised when it goes to Council.
Thank you very much. Yes, the position is, as you say with this, allowances are paid for special responsibility, and when the main review was done a couple of years ago, the Joint Planning Committee met, I think in the previous year once, or at most twice, and as is now, the chairman of the committee was chairman of one of the area committees, so was already paid an allowance. The Joint Planning Committee is meeting so frequently now that the burden on the officers, the chairman and the vice chairman of that committee, are such that it was felt that it's unfair that they could be in a position of not receiving an allowance, as is the case with the current vice chairman. The committee have reviewed it and are recommending a special responsibility allowance for the chairman and vice chairman of the Joint Planning Committee as set out in the recommendation. Any comments, please? One recommendation, is that agreed? Agreed. Item 16 is property matter and easement of access at 1 Crossways Cottages, Allfold. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Leader. Much of this report is an exempt, so I shall try to avoid the need to go into that. But essentially, as a result of a right to buy of a property many years ago, there is no official vehicular access to that property, although there is a right of a license of access over housing land. Basically, in order to allow the owners to sell the property on, the council is proposing a formal selling of land, effectively, for the at the front of the property rather than the rear, to allow that sale to go ahead. I commend the report.
Thank you very much. Yes, colleagues, you'll see the detail is set out in the exempt papers on 229. Are there any comments or questions, please? Councillor Denis.
Known the location well. It's not the best of locations, but the premises to the south and a number of the premises to the north of that address do have right of access across the land. So I would support it, even though the location isn't brilliant. It does make sense, and the other premises all around have similar access. That was it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, item 16, one recommendation. Is that agreed? Agreed. 17 is public speaking at planning committees. This, to a great degree, is set out in the item. Waverley, as you know, operates a public speaking scheme when eligible planning applications are considered committee, but at the moment there are different time allocations for speakers at area planning and joint planning committees. This item is recommending a consistent approach is applied at all meetings, and that each speaker, objector, town or parish council, applicant or councillor should be entitled to up to 4 minutes to address the area or joint planning committee. Public speaking scheme would be amended accordingly, and revised time limits would come into effect from the 1st of October this year. As it stands, the public get longer to speak than members, and that has slipped in somehow through alterations over time. So this is to bring it all back into line so that everybody gets the same. Any comments, please? One recommendation to item 17. Is that agreed? Agreed. Item 18 is the Executive Director's actions.
Thank you, Leader. 3 items under this category this month: gas safety inspections, payment of cost referred previously by the portfolio holder for finance, and the Christmas free parking initiative on the Thursdays leading up to Christmas. And the decision allows us to do some work with the chambers to implement projects in advance of Christmas to benefit traders and indeed shoppers, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very similar to the scheme we did last year over the Thursdays in December leading up to Christmas. That item is for note. Is it noted? Thank you. That brings to an end this evening's meeting. Thank you very much.